In this video, we'll take a look at if and if-else statements. These conditional statements give us the ability to run different blocks of code based on Boolean expressions. If you're not familiar with Boolean expressions, be sure to watch the previous video first. In order to jump right in with these examples, we're stepping away from our OOP perspective for a moment and just working within a main method. But don't worry, we'll be back to OOP in the next video. If you know me, you know that I really do love my teaching job. But I also love money, and the rest of my family loves fancy name brand clothes, and that's a problem. To solve that problem, I think I'll start selling some of my hilarious jokes. I'm going to write a program that calculates a total purchase price based on the number of jokes the customer wants to buy. I'll also give a discount if the customer buys 10 or more jokes. Let's get started. Jokes sell for $30 each, which sounds expensive, but I know my worth. If a customer buys 10 or more jokes, they get a 10% discount. Through the magic of video editing, I'll add a header with test cases and I'll get the scanner stuff ready to go. It's easy to forget those test cases, so keep ingraining that habit of adding them right at the start. They are worth points, and if you consistently leave them out, we have a prediction about your grade.
You shall not pass!
Test cases help us understand the code we need to write, starting with the variables we'll need. In this program, I have one input and one output, so I need at least two variables. That might not be the only variables I need, but I can create those two to start. I like to initialize local variables when I declare them. With numeric types, I tend to initialize them to -1. This really is just a reminder for myself. If I run the program and I see a negative number someplace where I don't expect it, it's a good indication that maybe I forgot to assign a value to one of those variables. A lot of people just initialize those variables to 0, and that's fine too. I'll prompt the user for the number of jokes they want to buy, and I'll store that in the numJokes variable I just declared. This is a good place to stop and test the program so far. Obviously, it doesn't really do much yet, but at least I know what I have so far is working. With that working, I'll calculate a total price by multiplying the number of jokes by the price per joke, which is 30. And I'll go ahead and output that total price. And I'll run the program and try my first test case. It looks good. Notice that the price only kinda looks like a currency value. It's not really formatted correctly. As beginners, we don't worry about making the output look pretty. We just want the program to work correctly. And to make sure it is working correctly, I'll run this a few more times with my other test cases. They all work until I get to 10 or more jokes, because obviously I haven't written the code for a discount yet. But because I did those test cases before we started, I've already worked out how the math works. If they buy enough for the 10% discount, it means they're really just paying 90% of the value. 90% as a decimal is 0.9. So I'll multiply the total price times 0.9 to get the discounted price. And there is a shorthand way to write this line of code that a lot of programmers would use, so I'll put that as a comment. And for now, I'm just going to add that code and try it out. Now the program works with those higher numbers, but it doesn't work if they're just buying a few jokes. We need the program to make a decision about whether or not to run that code that applies the discount. And we'll do that with an if statement. Start with the keyword if, followed by a set of parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we'll put a Boolean expression that determines whether or not the discount should be applied. They have to buy 10 or more, so I'll start with this Boolean expression and a code block. I'll move my discount calculation into that code block so that it only runs if the Boolean expression is true. And let's test that. We're really close, but when they buy exactly 10 jokes, they don't get the discount, and they should. This is where it's good to have thoughtful test cases. The calculation changes when they buy 10 jokes, so we call that an edge case. It's important to test edge cases to make sure our decision logic is correct. I've made a really common mistake here. My Boolean expression is numjokes is greater than 10, but I need to use numjokes is greater than or equal to 10 to include the edge case. I could also write it numjokes is greater than 9, but I think the greater than or equal to syntax is a little more clear when people look at the code. Let's test that again. Our if statement is good now. Okay, if I'm going to sell enough jokes to pay for all that Lululemon, I need to entice my cheap customers to buy a little more and get that discount. So I think we'll add a message for customers who don't buy enough jokes to get the discount. This means we're going to have two different blocks of code, and we only want one or the other to run. We can do that by adding an else block to our if statement. We're going to put that else keyword immediately after the end of that if code block, and then we'll add a code block to go with that else statement. Now we have these two code blocks. If the Boolean expression is true, the first block runs. If it's false, the second block runs. There's never a case when both blocks will run, and there's never a case when neither block will run. I'll add my enticing message to the else block so people who don't get the discount know what they're missing. Let's run that and try a couple different values. Well, this if-else structure is working fine, so I guess my money problems are solved. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video so I can start shopping for vacation homes. We'll look at some other things we can do with if-else statements in the next video.